here, recording our weekly podcast, and we're about to go live. Please let us know if you've got any questions or observations during the podcast. We've got a great guest today. We've got Lauren Kaufman, who's SVP at NJF. Hey, Lauren, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Good to have you here. We're in a little better shape than we were last week after the awards, the morning after. And hopefully my cough will not break out in the middle of the podcast like it did then, but I can't promise anything. So please, apologies for that if it happens. But yeah, we're about to get going. Hello and welcome to the PR Week. PR Week's regular weekly roundup of everything that matters in the worlds of PR and communications. My name's Steve Barrett. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of PR Week. Going to guide you through the next 25, maybe 30 minutes as we do our weekly show. And we have a fantastic guest for you. As always, Lauren Kaufman, SVP of NJF. That's a lot of acronyms and things. But welcome, Lauren. How are you?
Thank you. Very good. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, NJF used to be Nancy J. Friedman, didn't it?
Correct.
And you have shortened that, and you had you were acquired by MMGY almost about 18 months ago, I suppose.
Yes.
To make a sort of global group of travel hospitality specialist agencies.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we'll chat a bit about that. We've got Frank Washkuch here as usual. How you doing, Frank?
I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, man.
Good.
Yeah, been a busy week, hasn't it?
It has been a
Lots
busy
of
week.
Stories and
Well, I was off for the first couple of days.
you were.
Just
Which
keeping
made
busy.
it
Months.
even busier for us.
Yes.
Let's hope we kept up your standards in your absence.
Well, I won't say anything to that.
He's taking the fifth, everyone. But yeah, some good stories this week. Diana Bradley broke the story of the IBM Agency review, one of the longest standing client relationships with Ketchum and Tex 100, and they are now out, and the review is in process. So a big story there. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, Mark Zuckerberg. That's been the big story of the week, I think. Uber self-driving cars. I guess this was bound to happen. Very sad story, but someone was knocked over and killed by one of those cars. And it's the March for Our Lives this weekend. So we'll talk about that from a communications standpoint. But let's start with you, Lauren. Tell us about NJF. You know, what's the agency about? And looks like you had an amazing year, actually. Both from gaining revenue from an acquisition point of view, but presumably organically as well. Went up from $4.8 million in 2016 to $9.2 in 2017. Tell us about the agency and how you achieved such great growth.
Sure, happy to. So MMGY Global acquired NJF around Q4 2016. And the PR, social, and experiential practice of MMGY took on the NJF brand. And then a few months later, Myriad Marketing, which is a separate division that does destination representation, was acquired as well. And myself, as part of Spring O'Brien, was part of that acquisition. So right now, NJF encompasses all of us in the PR practice as well as social.
And you've just actually made another acquisition, haven't you? First foray abroad with Hills Balfour, which is in Europe and Dubai. Tell us about that. Was that under NJF or was that under MMGY?
They are an MMGY Global company, but they are retaining their name.
Okay. So tell us about the focus of the agencies, if you like, the travel and hospitality focus, and what are the trends that you're seeing now and what's driving your growth?
Sure. We specialize in everything from destinations and cruise lines, airlines, hotels, spas, pretty much planes, trains, and automobiles, how I usually explain it.
Great film.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nancy has a long-standing reputation of New York City hotels in particular, as well as the hotel industry. MMGY also has a lot of destinations. I come from a lot of the destination background, tour operators, and a lot of international business. So collectively together, we believe we're a powerhouse, putting all of our assets in one place.
Yeah, got some interesting areas there, and you know there's some great promotional work you can do, I guess, on destinations, but also you are going to get crisis situations, aren't you? Obviously with travel, whether it's someone booking into a hotel and the service is not to their liking, or a cruise liner. We've all seen the sort of food poisoning, or even the outbreaks of violence on ships or whatever. So is that part of what you do as well, and how do you prepare yourself for things like that when they do happen?
Yeah, well, crises you always have to be prepared for. We've seen that all too many times, unfortunately. Fortunately, we don't have it too often. If it's a very serious crisis situation, we have had clients like Los Cabos hire an agency specifically to handle that, and then we stick straight to the travel. But we always need to have a plan. We experience that. Lee County, Florida is one of my accounts, and that's the Fort Myers, Sanibel, Captiva areas.
Right.
And with the hurricane that hit in the fall, like having a straightforward plan of communication and action and what we should be doing and who we should be speaking to and what those talking points are was very important.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that in New York City, haven't we, with the weather over the past few weeks. Snow, even though it's the first day of spring yesterday, there was 6 to 10 inches of snow.
Joke. Yeah.
But, you know, if you're running an event which you've planned all year and all of
Yeah.
a sudden you're in that situation, how do you sort of approach that? What are the key points you need to be aware of?
Well, we had that actually the last snowstorm. We had DC, the destination of DC was in New York doing some media events, and we just hit the phones, hit the emails, you know, sent out calendar requests and made sure we got a turnout. And luckily enough, I think having a strong venue and conversation points for folks to show up, the drop-off wasn't terrible.
And the show went on.
The show, absolutely. We don't have a choice. The show always goes on. Yeah.
So we mentioned your great growth in 2017. What are the trends driving that? I think you were talking earlier about more integrated work, and obviously being part of MMGY kind of helps that because there's creative element to that holding structure. How are you going to market, and how is that benefiting you?
Yeah, I mean, we look at everything through, we're fortunate to have what was originally the Y of MMGY Global, which is the research portion. So a lot of our programs are research oriented. So being able to have that research and offer that to clients is a real strength, and it's an area of growth for us. Across all of these new acquisitions, we have clients that are now exposed to the ability to gain some of our knowledge in that capacity. We also have a full dedicated social team that's unmatched from what any of us have had previously. So we've been able to sell in a lot of services that we hadn't been able to offer our clients initially. So especially
Any particular
social.
examples kind of spring to mind?
Yeah, I mean, just this year alone, I mean, Eurail has been a client of mine personally for the last few years, and we wanted to tap an influencer market, which is all the rage these days.
Sure.
So we were able to use our in-house team to be able to collectively put together this great program with influencers and a sweepstakes and a campaign that went all against it, and we never needed to leave our four walls. So otherwise we would have lost, you know, that considerable piece of business to another agency. So we're able to grow internally. The organic growth has been substantial, and for me personally, that's where I find the excitement. You know, you do PR for so many years in a boutique agency, but even just the learnings that's transpired over the last 12 months to 18 months to really understand what goes on, you know, with all of the different areas, I think it makes us all better marketers. It exposes us to much more in the industry at large.
Who are some of the big travel influencers, you know, that have really changed the game in terms of being a conduit for you getting your messages across?
Oh, wow. I don't work with influencers personally all that much. I think folks like Johnny Jett and some others had like opened the door to it some years ago and really started the whole process going. I know especially it's been a challenge, particularly over the years, to educate clients on what social media can do for them, what digital outlets can do. I mean, I remember back in the day, you know, it was, you had X number of magazines and newspapers. You also had bigger budgets a lot of the times to deal with, but it became a bit of a counseling, which we're always counseling our clients, obviously, on what influencers can do for them. But today, having that dedicated practice really it brings it to a different level, because we would work with influencers more on a barter basis for press trips and so forth, but to be able to work with them from a content generation standpoint and get the UGC and all of the contractual obligations that are built in there, it just brings our work to another level.
And did you ever see any, hesitancy among travel companies to work with influencers? I'm thinking about Fire Festival last year and the big uproar around that. Did they ever hesitate to say, we want to work with this person who has a huge Instagram following or something like that?
Every client will have their own view. So yeah, if there's pushback on any particular thing, then that's where we need to be flexible, and the end result is making them happy and getting the good results. So yeah, I think we've all dealt with some pushback at different points in time, and we just need to adjust ourselves and find a different direction.
We've seen this week Meredith taking over Time, and looking to hive off parts of that empire and also cutting loads of jobs.
Yeah.
So the magazine industry is under stress, just like any other part of the media industry at the moment. Are the travel titles still strong? Are they still staying strong? And is that still a big medium for you to get your messages across for your clients?
Yeah, it is. I would say it's sort of the holy grails, if you will, for most of our clients. Those big books, Condé Nast Traveler, Travel and Leisure, Raw Report, Departures, the golden key kind of publications. So I have like an ITC Hotels in India client, and all they want are those few publications. That's sort of their micro focus for us. So it depends. Some clients are more open-minded and understand, that getting your message in a more broad fashion would, help their bottom line. So we have to kind of play our programs out according to what they want, but it's also our job to educate them and let them know about what the market offers and where they should be. Because sitting from afar, you don't necessarily know what goes on an everyday basis.
But like a hit in the travel section of the New York Times is still worth gold dust, presumably.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, well, interesting stuff. It's good to see smaller agencies doing really well and growing like you have, so good luck with that, and
Thank you.
Hope you have another great year. Frank, moving on to the news this week, lots going on. Let's pick up on this whole Facebook Cambridge Analytica thing. Mark Zuckerberg's been out and about, finally, the last sort of 18 hours, getting in front of a story. Some might say a little bit late, but what's your take on it, and how do you think he did?
I thought he did about as well as he could have when he was making the rounds with, I want to say, 4 or 5 different media outlets last night.
They were all exclusives, apparently.
Yeah. And he didn't say anything that made the situation worse.
Yeah, he seemed to be, one of the accusations about Facebook, it can be a little bit arrogant, can't it? Let's be honest. And he's certainly been accused of that in the past from, excuse me, listeners, I've still got my cough, as you can tell. When they went public, for example, they didn't come over to New York, did they? They did it all from the West Coast, and they got criticised for that, and their share price went down immediately afterwards. So, but it's a big issue, isn't it? And this whole debate about Facebook as a platform and data harvesting, and Cambridge Analytica that seems to have been doing work with all sorts of people, apparently involved in 200 different elections around the world. And what does it mean for communicators and for the way messages are being distilled and trust in platforms like Facebook?
Well, the thing I'm watching is to see whether or not there's any movement towards regulating Facebook, because that would have some effect in how communicators and marketers use it, one would think. It would also have some effect on how it collects data and shares data with other people. So I think that's the big thing to watch.
In fact, Zuckerberg even admitted that he wouldn't be averse to being regulated, didn't he, during his media interviews?
Yeah, well, I think he can tell which way the winds are blowing right now, and that there's going to be movement there.
What's your take on it, Lauren? Facebook's a massive medium. I'm sure it is for travel-related stuff. People are always sharing travel information, aren't they, on Facebook? But if there's even a movement now to just get off Facebook, isn't there? So, how do you use that as a platform? What's your take been on these events over the last few days?
Yeah, absolutely. From the industry approach, I think we need to take a look at that and make sure we're not losing all of our followers and fans, because it is a very strong place where people are putting our messages out. Clients pay us money to do that. So addressing that's important. On a personal level, all of this data sharing sort of, it's a little scary, to be honest, how your information's being used, whether it's against you or in other, marketing matters. We're in the marketing industry, but can't say that using data in that way is always what we're out
they
to
can
do.
predict from your likes, from your posts, what sort of, they can pretty much predict anything about you in terms. But we are, like you said, we are in marketing. I mean, should we care that much about it? Do you think young people care that much, or are they pretty much hip to it and they think, well, that's the price of free access or a free platform or whatever?
Yeah, I don't know if they think about it the same way. I mean, they've been brought up in this culture. For us, it's been an adaptation to it. So, like when we first figured out, and I mean, when I first read all of this, it's that millions of your friends can get access through you. I mean, that's inevitably almost all of us are going to get touched at some point, I feel, with some sort of breaches and that sort of stuff. But it scares me because that's not even my personal control. That's someone else giving access that I didn't grant. So it's a pretty deep story.
Yeah. Frank, are you going to dial back your Facebook activity?
I could live without it. I mean, I don't really use Facebook much. It's very useful for reminding me of birthdays. But I mean, I use Instagram more. I use Twitter a lot, but I don't use Facebook that much.
Yeah, interesting. Of course, Instagram's owned by Facebook.
Right.
Presumably has the same data, some of the same data.
Well, that's the thing, is that there hasn't been a lot of buzz about Instagram, and finally, I think like on the 6th day of this story, you're finally seeing some. Well, if you're using Instagram, you're still kind of in the family.
Remind me of the messaging app that Facebook bought is
WhatsApp.
WhatsApp, and
Yeah.
their founder came out and basically said, "Get off Facebook," didn't he? Which was interesting.
Yeah, which was a mixed reaction to that for sure, since he made like $14 billion from Facebook. So, yeah.
He's taken the money and run.
Yeah.
But I'm waiting to see what they do with that, because they haven't really developed it or integrated it particularly, have they?
Well, it's more your audience than mine, isn't it? In that it's an international crowd. Where
that's true. When you're traveling, it's really useful.
Yeah, I mean, I've never used WhatsApp, but I hear from friends who either live abroad or have taken jobs elsewhere that they use it all the time, and it's very useful for them.
It's the primary source of communication for a lot of India, Israel, all of our Caribbean clients. We'd get all of the messaging is on WhatsApp. I'm like, no, can you sign the contract and not WhatsApp? It's all good.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And then they've got WeChat and Line in Asia, that they're much more closed networks, I suppose, and maybe that is the way things are going. But that does give you another final step toward e-commerce in some situations. So yeah, interesting stuff. Okay, the big story in the PR world was the IBM Agency review, wasn't it? Tell us all about that, because that was certainly got some good traffic on PRWeek.com.
Yeah, so IBM is reviewing its agency relationships under its new communications leader, Ray Day, who you would know from his time at Ford. And they're looking to bring on a set of new agencies, including two cornerstone firms, if you will, and they are parting ways with their longtime agencies of Ketchum and Tex 100, both of which they have worked with since 2001.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, that. Really iconic account, wasn't it? Johnny Watter was head of comms at IBM, very much held up as the gold standard, and the communications person who transitioned into marketing. And that's all changed. Obviously, John has retired now, and I guess those agencies were heavily linked with his legacy. Lauren, from an agency point of view, at some point, I guess a relationship with a client runs its course. Have you come across that? And how do you keep agency relationships fresh, after more than a decade?
Yeah, I mean, that's the nature of our business. I mean, you can't take your own clients for granted, because things like this do happen and changes your business internally. I think that's where we need to continuously evolve what we're providing them and be very, I like to think that we're all one team as opposed to an agency. So to be inside and outside at the same time. So you can kind of see which way the tide is going sometimes, but to come to the table with more creative ideas, have those open discussions. What can we do for you? How can we potentially break through this? It's been a challenge. I think we've all lost business.
Yeah, definitely. You
that's
can't be
just the way it
complacent,
is.
can you? And you can't
No.
get too comfortable, and you can't sort of put all your efforts on the new business side. You've got to make sure you're keeping the existing clients happy, and I guess organic growth is the best, easiest type of growth, isn't it? Because you've already got that client.
Yeah, it costs like 4 times the amount of money
to win new
business. So you have to keep your clients happy.
Absolutely. And over at Ford, actually, coincidentally, Chris Preuss, who is an auto industry PR veteran, he's come from Delphi most recently, but he's been around the block like a lot of auto PR people. Do you see what I did there, Frank?
Around the block.
He's taken over at WPP's team called Blue something, isn't it? Their team that services the Ford account. He's taken over from Gary Coops, anyway. And that again is, Mark Truby came in to replace Ray Day. So another catalyst for that is when the client changes. It's a bit like the in-house person often changes when the CEO changes, and then when the client changes, the agencies have to be on high alert, I guess. So yeah, interesting stuff. Frank, let's talk about Uber. It was bound to happen. Someone's been knocked over and killed by a self-driving car, and thousands of people die every day being hit by cars. And ultimately, I think the sort of general view is that self-drive cars and automated cars are going to be safer in the long run. But tell us what happened and how has Uber responded?
Right, so this accident happened earlier this week in Tempe, Arizona, and it's largely played in the media as that Uber's technology just isn't ready yet, that this is evidence that it's not ready yet. Dash cam footage was released yesterday by the Tempe Police Department, which seemed to show that the human operator that was in the car didn't quite step in to stop the car from hitting the person. So I think it's managed to raise a lot of questions about what exactly happened here and where the technology's at.
Yeah. I have to say I was in a cab yesterday and I saw a car reversing down a one-way street and just reversed into someone who was crossing the road. So, there's crazy behaviours by drivers all the time, aren't there? And I think the long-term philosophy is that self-driving is probably going to be safer. But the challenge is going to be getting over this one, isn't it? Every time a self-driving car, something happens, there's going to be a big, massive media exposure about it. It's a difficult one, isn't it, from a comms point of view, Lauren?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, yeah. Uber feels bad about it.
Of course, yeah.
And they'll pull their cars, but yeah, then what the next steps will be interesting to see when they're going to put them back on, what technologies may or may not change, and where do you kind of just allow them into the world,
But it's definitely, if you look at the trucking industry, that is going to be transformed by self-driving vehicles, and it's one of the biggest providers of jobs, of blue-collar jobs, and so this is one of the whenever the AI discussion comes up, that's one of the big things that comes up. So it's going to be a big story over the next few years. Let's finish with March for Our Lives, which takes place this weekend. The youth activists, sort of stemming from Florida after the horrible shooting down there, have really given a bit of an object lesson in communications, really, haven't they, Frank?
Yeah,
the way they've done this has
they've been extremely impressive.
Yeah.
They've been extremely impressive, both in how comfortable they are on camera, how they manage to use language on TV in a very sophisticated way, and their use of social media. Yeah, they've been very impressive. Yeah,
they're kind of taking the high ground, Lauren, almost, and showing the adults how to do it in many respects, and especially some of our politicians these days, aren't they?
Seriously.
So it's been incredible to watch.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. They're not afraid to ask some of the tough questions and keep on these folks. I mean, watching it, I was so proud of what these children have stood up for, and even the walkout, to see all of the kids doing that, over the last week. I think, this is our next generation. If they don't take this stand and gain some, political influence, I think they want to take their world into their own hands. And I say, do it. I think it's a great communications
I
way
agree.
after what was obviously a tragedy, but we don't want to see any more of that. So
Yeah, it's a wake-up call for adults and for the establishment, and it's going to be really interesting because actually one of the big drivers is to get young people to register, to vote and engage in the democratic system, which, historically young people have never done so in many big numbers, and I think that's going to change elections moving forward. Frank, do you see it as something that will change things, or is this just a blip and it will go back
Well,
to
I think it
normal?
remains to be seen. I mean, I would think it's going to be a big march in D.C., and I think there will be a number of large separate marches in different cities. But whether that results in any legislation in the next 6 months before the midterms, I think that's hard to say. 8 months before the midterms. I don't know that. So it will be interesting to see if the voter drive that comes along with it will really have an impact.
And to see whether we saw Conor Lamb in Philadelphia
Yeah.
get in this week, or at least he's set to go.
The other side of the state. Anyway,
Sorry, I don't want to get.
I won't be picky.
I won't get into Philadelphia and the vagaries of, because you are our expert on that. But it'd be interesting to see whether there was a rise in youth voting, amongst that.
Yeah. I think that's another indicator. It's probably going to be a Democratic midterm election 8 months from now. But we'll see. I mean, it looks like it will be.
All right. Well, thank you, Lauren, for joining us. Great discussion.
thank
Good
you
luck.
for having me.
Before I die of my cough, I'm going to wrap this up. We've got, don't forget, just before we go, Brand Film Festival takes place on May the 3rd at the Paley Media Centre. Fantastic event, our third year, and I was looking at some of the films this morning, actually. Really brilliant crop of films to watch, so come along to that. Our Global Awards are in London on May the 15th. That's becoming the big global PR event. And our conference is set for Chicago in October the 18th. So looking forward to that, looking forward to taking that on the road. But for now, that's all we got time for. We'll see you next time on the PR Week.